The cold of the night penetrated my torn blanket like a sharp blade, as I huddled in a corner of the sidewalk, watching life go by. The city lights flickered, reflecting dreams on every face that crossed the street. I always dreamed of being in the center of that light, on a big stage, with applause ringing in my ears. But there I was, invisible, lost in the crowd. Just another shadow waiting for someone to notice my presence. My voice, a raw and sincere melody, echoed in the notes I sang. It was an act of survival. Music was my only friend, my way of shouting to the world that I existed. "Sing, Sarah, sing," I told myself as people passed by, some giving curious glances, others completely ignoring. My fingers were shaking from the cold, but I didn't let that stop me. Every note that escaped my lips was an attempt at release. It was then that I saw him. Jack, the manager of the restaurant Sabor and CIA, leaving his work for lunch. I watched him from my corner. Just another face in the crowd. He looked worried, with a tense expression and hunched shoulders, as if the weight of the world was on them. The people hustling around him didn't notice, but I did. Something about him resonated with my own pain, and for a moment, I thought maybe he could understand. When Jack stopped and heard my voice, time seemed to slow down. His gaze lit up, and I saw a spark of hope in his eyes. He approached, hesitating for a moment, as if he were about to break through a barrier. "Hi," he said, voice shaking. "You sing very well. What are you doing here?" I smiled, a shy gesture that barely hid my insecurity. "Just trying to stay warm and survive." My voice sounded weaker than I expected, but he didn't seem to mind. "What if I told you I could have a place to sing? A place where you wouldn't have to worry about the cold?" Jack asked, almost as if he was making a magical proposal. "One place?" I wondered, incredulity showing in my voice. "You mean a stage? Like a restaurant?" He nodded, his expression becoming more confident. "Yes, in my restaurant. If you want, I can offer you an opportunity to introduce yourself. In return, you would have food. What do you think?" The idea left me speechless. I wanted to scream with joy, but doubt consumed me. "Why would you do this for me? I'm just a homeless person." "Because your voice deserves to be heard," he replied sincerely. "And I need something that brings life to my restaurant. It could be a good opportunity for both." I looked at him, searching for sincerity in his eyes. There was something genuine about his offer, a spark of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Do you really think I can do this?" "Of course. You have talent, Sarah. Music is powerful, and you can touch people's hearts," Jack encouraged. I could feel the determination in his words. On impulse, I decided to accept. "Okay, I accept. But only if you promise me you won't leave me aside." Jack smiled, a smile that seemed to light up the room. "Promise. Let's do this together." That moment, a simple conversation between a manager and a homeless woman, seemed to be the crossroads of my life. The possibility of a new beginning lit a fire inside me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be heard. I felt intensely cold as I watched the cars pass by on the sidewalk. The city never slept, but for me, each night brought the same loneliness. The torn blanket that wrapped around my body wasn't enough to warm my soul, but the song I sang warmed me from the inside out. That was my way of resisting, of making myself heard in a world that seemed to have forgotten my name. That day, something different happened. Jack, the manager of the Sabor and CIA restaurant, went out for lunch, and when he heard me singing, he stopped. His eyes fixed on me as if I were the only thing that mattered at that moment. He approached, hesitantly, as if he didn't know if he should get involved. "Hi," he said, his voice soft and encouraging. "You sing very well. Have you ever thought about performing in a different place?" I hesitated. The idea of singing in a restaurant was scary, but the memory of so many nights without eating made me consider it. "A different place? What do you mean?" I asked, trying to hide the hope that began to well up inside me. "I work in a restaurant. If you want, I can offer you an opportunity. You sing there, and in return, we give you some meals." The proposal was tempting. The possibility of a welcoming place, the chance to be seen and heard. But at the same time, the fear of being rejected paralyzed me. What if they don't like me? I questioned, my voice shaking. "I believe they will like it. Your music has a truth that wins people over. And the food is great, you'll love it," he replied with an encouraging smile. After a few seconds of silence, I accepted. Okay, I'll go. But only if you promise I won't get expelled. Promise. He smiled, and I knew there was something genuine about his offer. It was like he really wanted to help me. The next day, I arrived at the restaurant nervous. The smell of fresh food and the buzz of customers created a vibrant yet intimidating environment. Before going up to the small stage, I took a deep breath and looked around. The curious eyes of the customers turned to me, and butterflies in my stomach made me hesitate. You can do it, I muttered to myself, remembering what Jack had said. He was in the kitchen, but he could sense my apprehension. The first chord of the guitar playing in the background gave me courage. When I started singing, something magical happened. The voices around me were silenced, and all that existed was me and the music. Every note that left my mouth seemed to carry with it a piece of my pain, and I felt free. The audience began to pay attention, and expressions of curiosity turned into smiles. She is amazing, whispered a woman at the front table, and that gave me even more strength. I looked at Jack, who was watching from the kitchen, and saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You're killing it, Sarah, he shouted, his voice echoing over the sound of the music. This made me smile even more. As I sang, I realized that the clients were connecting with each lyric, with each verse that narrated my struggle and my dreams. It was as if, for a brief moment, I wasn't just a homeless person, but an artist, a person with a story to tell. The song came to an end and, to my surprise, they gave a standing ovation. The sound of clapping resounded like an echo of approval, and I felt alive. The energy in the air was palpable, and I realized that, for a moment, I had managed to touch the hearts of everyone there. But in the back of my mind, an unsettling thought persisted. What if Thomas, the restaurant owner, didn't like it? The pressure of expectation was beginning to settle in my chest. I knew Jack was rooting for me, but the shadow of an uncertain future hung over my head. When I woke up that morning, the biting cold seeped through my torn blanket, as if to remind me that the world outside was no place for dreamers. The sun had not yet fully risen, and the city was shrouded in a blanket of fog. The air was heavy, but something inside me pulsed, a mix of fear and hope. I knew I had to sing again. Music was the only thing that made me feel alive. After a few moments, I decided it was time to leave my makeshift shelter. With a little effort, I managed to stand up and shake the dust off my clothes. The first thing I did was look for a strategic corner on the sidewalk, where the acoustics could favor me. That location, close to the Sabor and CIA restaurant, looked promising. I put on my guitar, which always accompanied me, and started playing some soft notes. The melody spread through the air, mixing with the noise of the waking city. The restaurant's first customers began to arrive. I looked at them, a little nervous, but continued singing. The song was a ballad about lost hopes and dreams, and I soon noticed that some people were stopping to listen to me. Among them was Jack, the restaurant manager. He had a worried expression on his face, but when he heard my voice, his eyes lit up with a spark of curiosity. You sing very well, he said, approaching after the performance. There's something special about your voice. Have you ever thought about performing here at my restaurant? The proposal took me by surprise. Here? At Sabor and CIA? I asked, trying to understand if he was really serious. Yes, Jack confirmed, a hopeful smile on his lips. I promise you'll get meals in return. People need to hear your music. I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. It was an opportunity one had never imagined. A place, even if small, where I could sing and feel alive. I accept, I replied, my voice shaking slightly. In the days that followed, Jack was gracious in introducing me to clients. This is Sarah, he would say, his tone always encouraging. She is a talented artist. People began to get used to my presence, and an emotional connection was formed. I sang more often, and the music seemed to bring new life to the room. But there was a shadow hanging over our heads. Thomas, the restaurant owner, was a conservative man. Jack often talked about his demands, and the idea of having a homeless woman come forward might not sit well with him. I knew time was running out, and the tension was growing every day. We have to be careful, Sarah, Jack warned me in one of our conversations. Thomas isn't someone who understands art the same way I do. He sees numbers, sales. If he finds out you're here. His voice was lost in a heavy silence. I don't want to be a problem for you, I replied, feeling the weight of his concern. I just want to sing and have a place where I belong. "You belong here," he assured, looking into my eyes sincerely. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect this." But life has a way of surprising us. One cloudy morning, when the restaurant was busier than ever, the door opened with a bang and Thomas walked in, his imposing presence bringing everyone to a halt. My heart raced. Jack gave me a look of despair, and I knew the decisive moment had arrived. Time had run out, and what happened next was beyond our control. The atmosphere at the Sabor and CIA restaurant was full of expectation. I was nervous, but the adrenaline of being there on stage gave me courage. When my voice rang out for the first time, a wave of emotion washed over me. The song I chose was a part of me, a narrative that told about the difficulties I faced on the streets, but also about the hope that I never let die. I felt each word resonate in my heart, and as I sang, I realized that the customers' eyes were fixed on me. There was a connection, a silent empathy that filled the air. "This is for all of us who fight and dream," I declared, before starting to sing. The melody flowed like a river, smooth and intense, and I let myself be carried away by the notes. The sound of the guitar that accompanied my voice seemed to dance with the melody of my life, and I could see the expressions changing on the faces of those present. Some people were smiling, others were teary-eyed. The warmth of acceptance and support enveloped me like a hug. "She is amazing," I heard a man whisper to the woman next to him. The sparkle in his eyes encouraged me even more. The music picked up in intensity, and when I finished, the entire restaurant erupted in applause. I couldn't contain my smile. The support and affection, I felt there was something I hadn't experienced in a long time. But at the same time, a shadow of worry enveloped me, knowing that Thomas could appear at any moment. It was when, in the middle of that celebration, the restaurant doors opened abruptly. Thomas entered, and the sound of the music seemed to fall silent for a moment. He was there. His imposing and austere presence soon took over the room. I recognized him immediately. My heart raced in a mix of fear and expectation. His expression was grim, and I knew the joy he felt could be shattered in an instant. Thomas stood still, listening to the melody that still floated in the air. I saw his expression slowly change, from a look of disapproval to a look of confusion. He looked around, noticing that everyone was enchanted by the performance. But when his eyes finally fixed on me, a wave of shock passed across his face. He didn't expect to find me there. "Sarah," he murmured, as if the name were a painful discovery. The audience's murmur dissolved into a tense silence. I could feel the weight of the situation, and for a moment the air felt thick and difficult to breathe. Thomas seemed lost in thought, perhaps remembering his own childhood and the difficulties he had faced. But his first reaction was not compassion. It was a mix of disapproval and shock. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice firm. "This is not the place for you." His words cut the air like a knife. The warmth and joy he felt before seemed to dissipate. I looked at Jack, who was behind the bar, and saw the concern on his face. He knew what was at stake. "Thomas, please," Jack started, but Thomas interrupted him. "No, Jack. This cannot happen. This restaurant is a business, not a stage for your displays." I felt discouragement take over me, but I wasn't going to let that moment defeat me. I took a deep breath and, in a burst of courage, approached the microphone again. "Thomas, I just wanted to show that music can bring people together, it can bring hope." He looked at me, and in that instant, I realized there was something more behind his eyes. A weakness, perhaps, a part of himself he didn't want to acknowledge. But the tension in the air was palpable, and I knew I had to do something to transform the moment. Music was my only weapon. With a determined look, I started to sing a new melody, one that talked about overcoming and the strength that each of us carries within ourselves. The notes started flowing again, and as I sang, I realized the audience was joining me. Music filled the restaurant, and for a brief moment, Thomas's hard gaze seemed to soften. I wanted him to feel, to understand that my presence there was more than just a display. It was a cry for freedom and a search for acceptance. Every chord I played seemed to make the connection between us stronger, and even though Thomas was in shock, the hope that he could understand my message lit my heart. But I knew that battle was still far from won. The atmosphere at the Sabor and CIA restaurant was heavy, like a storm about to break out. I could feel Thomas's gaze burning into me, as if he were skinning me alive. The sound of the music that still echoed in my ears seemed distant, overshadowed by the tension that hung in the air. Jack was standing right in front of me, like a shield between me and Thomas's fury. "She can't stay here, Jack," This is unacceptable. Thomas's voice cut through the air, cold and implacable. He gestured with his hands, as if trying to dispel the idea that I, a simple homeless person, could have any value in his restaurant. Thomas, wait. You don't understand. Jack began, but the interruption was quick. No, you don't understand. What will customers think? What will this do to the restaurant's image? Thomas's frustration was palpable. He was trapped in his own vision of success where appearance and reputation were everything. What he didn't see was the transformation I had brought to that place. With my heart racing, I knew I needed to act. Music has always been my salvation, and it was time to use my voice again. Jack, I said, almost whispering, let me sing one more time. It wasn't just a request, it was a desperation, a plea for a moment when I could be heard, where my pain and my hope could be echoed by those who were there. Jack looked at me, his eyes filled with uncertainty, but soon determination shone in them. It's okay, Sarah. If you think you can. I approached the stage, the microphone was there, waiting for me. The first note of the song I chose began to flow, like a river that finally found its way. The song was a mix of sadness and hope, a song that spoke about the struggles I faced, but also about the light that still shined within me. And I sang to the stars in the loneliness of the night. My voice echoed through the restaurant, and I saw people's faces turn to me, their expressions changing from curiosity to empathy. The atmosphere was changing, and I could feel the energy pulsing around me, as if everyone was coming together into one emotion. Look at her, Thomas. Look at what she brought. Jack exclaimed, his voice loud and clear, cutting through Thomas's resistance. She is not just a homeless person. She is an artist. And her music is making people come back, making them feel alive again. I continued singing, each verse bringing me closer to the truth I carried in my chest. Tears started to slide down my face, but I didn't care. Music was my form of release, and I wanted everyone to feel the depth of what I was going through. The silence turned to applause, and I realized that people were standing up, applauding, supporting me. Thomas stood there, almost paralyzed, his eyes fixed on me, as if he was reliving his own memories. The restaurant now pulsed with new life. The looks of support and understanding I received were like a warm hug. You can't just dismiss it, Thomas, Jack insisted, his voice now firm as steel. Look at what she's doing for us. Look at what she's doing for you. And in that moment, as my voice rose and people joined in a chorus of support, I knew I was doing more than just singing. I was fighting for myself, for Jack, and in some ways, for Thomas's own humanity. What he would decide next was uncertain, but music had the power to break down barriers, and I was determined to make him feel that. The atmosphere at Sabor and CIA was charged with emotion. Sarah's music still echoed in the air, and I could feel the weight of expectation in the room. The customers' eyes, previously curious, were now full of support and empathy. However, Thomas's expression showed no signs of softening. He stood still, rigid, as if a storm was about to brew. Jack, what are you doing? This is unacceptable, he growled, his voice sharp as glass. You can't just bring this girl into our restaurant. What will customers think? I felt distressed. Sarah's music had enchanted everyone there, and I saw how she was touching their hearts. Thomas, you don't understand. Her music brought life to our place. People are connecting with her. This is what we need. We need a consuming public, Jack, not a street display, he replied, but there was a slight tremor in his voice. The harshness of his words was beginning to crumble. I turned to Sarah, who was standing at the side of the stage, the look of vulnerability on her face slowly turning into determination. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself again? I asked, feeling like this might be the last chance to change Thomas's perception. She looked at me, and for a moment, her eyes reflected terror and hope. I don't know if I can do this again, Jack. What if he doesn't like what I sing? What if nothing changes? You can. You are incredible. People need to hear your story, I encouraged her, feeling the pressure of time running out. She took a deep breath, and, as if preparing for a big leap, she took the stage again. The murmur in the room fell silent, and all eyes turned to her. The guitar that a customer had kindly provided was in his hands. She positioned herself and started playing. The melody that flowed from its strings was soft, almost like a whisper, but carried the force of a storm. This song is about hope and pain, she began, her voice hesitant at first but soon becoming firm. about finding light in the darkness. As she sang, her emotions began to show, and I saw tears in some of the customers' eyes. It was as if, somehow, she was taking everyone there on a journey through her life. Thomas was standing still, his arms crossed, but his gaze was fixed on Sarah. I could feel his resistance starting to crumble. With each verse, the intensity of the song grew, and when it reached the chorus, a wave of emotion took over the room. That song became a cry of resilience and solidarity, and there was no way to ignore the power of the message it conveyed. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. But I could still see the internal struggle on Thomas's face. He was visibly shaken. What happened next was unexpected. He stood up, and the room fell silent again, everyone waiting for his reaction. "Thomas," I started, but he interrupted me. "Shut up, Jack. I need to do this." He walked to the stage, and the scene looked like a slow-motion movie. The tension was palpable. What would he do? What would he say? When he reached the microphone, his voice was shaky. "Sarah, I was also a singer once. Before all this, before the restaurant. I know what it's like to fight for a dream." He took a deep breath and, surprising everyone, began to sing along with her. The song they chose was about overcoming, and the way their voices intertwined was magical. It was as if a new bond was being formed between them, and the audience was completely involved. Tears streamed down many people's faces, including mine. The music brought together not just Thomas and Sarah, but all of us there. At the end of the performance, the applause was deafening. Thomas, still panting, turned to the audience and with a genuine smile, announced, "From today onwards, Sabor and CIA will be a space for local artists. Sarah, you will always have your place here. Let's build a new family together." Hearing those words, my heart skipped a beat. The transformation was complete. Redemption was not just Sarah's, but Thomas's as well. And in some way we would all be part of this new story.